Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending our webinar, Gemba Walks for Construction, which is presented by Tammy and Ryan from J.E. Dunn Construction. There's a couple of housekeeping items I'd like to go over before we get started. The first is this webinar is being recorded, and all attendees will receive a copy of the recording and the slide deck after the webinar is over. This webinar is also self-report for CM Lean and AIA continuing education credits. So please be on the lookout for your certificate of attendance when we send the recording and the slide deck. You'll be getting that as well. You'll also notice the long skinny box on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a red arrow to the left of that box. That's the minimization and maximization arrow. So please feel free to use that throughout the presentation so you can view the presentation more closely. In that box at the bottom, you'll see the questions box. Please feel free throughout the presentation, if you have a question, to write it in that box. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. But again, if you have a specific question about an image or a slide, go ahead and put that with your question in the questions box, and we will try to get to that as soon as possible. We're also going to be doing a quick plus delta at the end of the presentation to get that feedback from you. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, pluses are things you liked about the presentation, you enjoyed, you thought we explained well, and deltas are things that you think we could change, or wishes. You wish you would have gone into more detail about, you wish you would have talked about it all, you wish you would have not gone into more detail about, or you wish you would have stayed away from. In the spirit of continuous improvement, we'd really like that feedback from you. So go ahead and be thinking about that throughout the presentation too. Again, a little recap, this presentation is being recorded. You'll receive a copy of the slide deck and the PowerPoint presentation, as well as a certificate of attendance so you can self-report for those AIA and those AGC credits. Long skinny box on the right-hand side of the screen, there's that minimization and maximization arrow. You'll also see the questions box. Put any questions that you have in that throughout the presentation. They'll be answered at the end, and also remember that feedback throughout the presentation so we can do that plus delta for you. All right, so without further ado, I also want to welcome our guests from LCI Qatar. We have a large group coming in from all over the world today, and I wanted to throw out a specific mention to them. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tammy and Ryan. Thanks so much for presenting for us, guys.
All right, thanks, Eileen, for that, getting us kicked off this morning. Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Ring. I'm a senior lean specialist for J.E. Dunn. I'm based in their Minneapolis, Minnesota office, and my counterpart, Tammy, who will introduce herself, is also here today.
All right, so I'm Tammy McConaughey. I'm out of the Denver office, beautiful Denver today, getting some exciting thunderstorms again, which are my favorite. So we appreciate all of you guys being on this call. We're going to go on this journey and we're going to get started. So a little bit of where we want to go today. So our outcomes for today, we want to help you guys gain a basic understanding of Gemba and Gemba Walks. We want to talk about the how. How do we do that? How do we observe? What are we discussing? What are we debriefing? And then what are those ways to use improvements? How do we build that trust with the workers or the people doing the work that we are observing? As always, this is one step in our lean journey, and lean is a journey. I can't even tell you how many times I feel like I've gotten to that competency and mastery level just to drop right back down to the unaware. There seems to be new information, or I learn something new from a team or from somebody else, and I go right back through the chain again. So today we're looking at taking you guys from a spot of awareness of that from what Gemba Walks are to the how we can further understanding of the how and the why. We're going to go on a journey. So this is where our roadmap for today. We're going to start with going to the place of the process. We're going to take you a little bit to talk about observe and talking with people. We're going to talk about 8 ways. And then we're going to finalize it with mapping those documents and the observations.
All right, so before we really get into talking about Gemba Walks, we want to really get at what the definition of Gemba is, right? It's a Japanese word. You don't need to use this, but the word itself. But Gemba is the place where the work is done. I mean, that's where the stuff happens on site. So when you go out and you look, and this is where the nails get pounded into wood and the concrete gets poured. All right, so a Gemba walk is a purposeful walk, right, of going and seeing the work happen. So I'm a superintendent by trade. That's my background. I would go for multiple site walks a day, right? but they weren't really Gemba walks. There's a difference. I was seeing things getting done, but I wasn't understanding how they were getting done, and I wasn't understanding what improvements could have been made, right? So there is a big distinction between the two, right? There's a purpose. You're going to go walk, you're going to go and see, but you're going to make improvements out of it, and you're going to have real conversations about it.
So there's 3 steps of a Gemba walk. We want to keep it simple. We don't want to overproduce this. We want to keep it simple, right? 3 steps. 1, why? Define the walk. Why are we doing it? Are we going to understand, further understand a problem that we're having? Is it to see how a process is being implemented and how it's being actually implemented in the field? Identifying that ideal state and then going and seeing the current state so we can think about the gaps in between. And you want to prepare for it. You don't want to go, if you're going to observe a process, if you're going to look for 8 waste, you want to do some preparation and understanding to know what you're going to look at or what you're looking for as far as that process or those wastes. Then you go and do the walk. You go and see. I think one of the things to remember here is if you go back to Toyota Way, to Hachi Ono, he used to draw a circle in the middle of the floor of the factory with a piece of chalk. And he would stand in the middle of that circle and he would quietly observe. And he'd be looking at that section of the line that he was focusing on, right? And he would just observe and he'd be taking notes of what he observed and what he was seeing. And then he would ask the what's and the whys, showing respect to the workers to further understand what he saw. So that way he could further his understanding and learning of what was currently going on. That comes down to that debriefing the walk, pulling the people in, which we will talk about more later in this presentation. So we talked a little bit about what to look for. We said, what is the purpose? So what are the things that you can do a Gemba walk around? So some of those things, like we talked about, standard work. My favorite one is 8 wastes. I think understanding the 8 wastes and going to do a waste walk and looking for waste, not even just in the field or in our offices. For those of you who have read 2 Second Lean, it's a little Paul Acre-ish, but being at the grocery store, being at a coffee shop, being somewhere that you can easily understand the value of what that person is producing, and then look for the waste around them. Where are the wastes in that? I know, I'm a lean nerd. I understand, it happens, but that's what happens when you're passionate about your job.
We're both a couple of lean nerds because I'm pretty Paul Acre-ish around my house, so there's nothing wrong with that, Tammy.
So those are the things. We want to have that purpose. We need to understand who's going to be a part of it. We need to pull them into that. Are we problem solving? Are we looking for a process? What are those things and why are we looking for them? As we get into that Gemba walk, questions are important. Asking the right questions. We want to make sure that we're using those humble inquiry questions that are allowing us to learn more, allowing us to engage the people and the workers. Here's a great list of guiding questions. My favorite one on here to ask is, how will you know it's been a successful day? Not only asking my kids, which you often get kind of that eye roll and then we move on, but asking a worker out on a job site or in a meeting, if we're having a daily stand-up in our office, asking one of them the question there. Just prompting those to hear from the worker or the person doing the work, hearing from their mouth what that is that they're looking to succeed at for that day.
So as we get into the Gemba, we want to understand what we're really trying to look at. And part of that is understanding the definition of value. And up on the screen, there's the definition from Jeffrey Liker and the Toyota Way, which is an excellent book. It's long, but it's a great book for anyone wanting to learn about lean and applying it to their work. But value is something the client is willing to pay for, right? Everything else is either non-value added or it's waste. And if you look at an overall process, it's a little bit of a little gut check because there's not as much value added work in a process as you would really like to think, at least the first time when you start looking into it. But now when we think about the term client or customer, Tammy, what do you think? Who are our clients or customers?
Oh gosh, this is a hard question, Ryan. So a customer is anybody who is provided with a good service or information. So oftentimes, if we're looking at construction, right, a project coordinator can be a customer of a project manager. If we're looking at design, an engineer could be a customer of a superintendent. At any time, that relationship's going back and forth, right? Did I get it right, Ryan?
Man, you get 1 point today for definition of who our customers are. But that is a great thing to think about, is when you think about that, it's really the handoff relationship is what defines a customer-provider relationship. So think about all of the handoffs that happen on site. So now that we've talked about what value is, who creates it, right? Those are, again, it goes back to those doing the work. It's the pounding nails into forms, it's pouring the concrete, it's installing cabinets. It's also on the design side, the ones who are designing the building, right? Everyone else you kind of consider support staff, and I'm included in that, right? We serve the value creators, and when you're doing Gemba walks, that's one thing to really focus on and keep in mind. All right, I'm having a little trouble. I apologize with getting the slides to switch. So when you tie together your value and the person who creates it, right? It's not just a one handoff and we're done, especially in the system of constructing and building buildings. So we think of that in a value stream, right? So this is from conception of a building all the way through closeout. That is our value stream when we think about construction or building of buildings, whatever you want to do, our project base. So that is how our value stream is defined, of that we're a sequence of a bunch of interdependent activities. So with all of us having to work together kind of inside of that value stream, you know, the traditional method is we really are set up in silos, and we still are set up in silos. Let's be real. What Gemba walks really do is they help unify us and get us all kind of together and understanding of each other's work. You know, I recall many times, and many of you may recall times of, think of a long nagging problem or challenge that happened on one of your job sites. And it just seemed to nag and nag and nag. Just think about how quickly that problem could have been solved if the owner, the designer, the GC, and even the trade foreman or yourself, whoever, actually went out, looked at the problem together to find the best solution for the project to deliver the most value to the client, right? Problems get solved a lot easier when all stakeholders can swarm the problem and come up with a good solution together. That's what Gemba walks really will help with too, as you're identifying constraints and removing them on the project.
So Ryan touched on, when we compartmentalize and we look at the separate pieces of the value stream, we're really focused on that modern management. When we're able to look at the whole of the value stream, we're looking at being able to optimize that whole. We're switching ourselves into that lean management. And that's really, by doing that, where we want to go to Gemba, we want to understand what's happening at every level of that value stream, not just in our blinded little section. A great way, an easy way to go to Gemba is to go and look for waste. So waste is defined as any activity that requires time or resources but does not create value as defined by the customer. Ryan and I are going to go through the 8 wastes that are out there, give you guys a better understanding, and we're going to provide some examples as we go through this too. So the very first one on top of there is over/under production. So producing more or producing less than is needed, or before or after it is needed by the next customer in the process, is over/under production. This could possibly be a knee-jerk reaction to waiting. Oftentimes we see this in the build world when you're behind schedule. We throw more bodies at it, right? We throw more bodies on site to get on top of the work. So we're overproducing labor at that point.
So we'll move into excess inventory. That's the other one on top there. And that's any extra information material that has to be stored, right? My favorite example, and I always will pick on the tinners or the sheet metal workers on site, because it always seems to be they get a couple big semi loads of ductwork at the beginning of the job, and it just goes into the middle of the floor, and now we have to work around it and store it and protect it. So.
Waiting is our next one, and waiting is just what it sounds like. It's waiting. Oftentimes waiting is necessary or it's built into the process. But think about a room full of people waiting for a meeting to start. That's a huge waste. And a lot of times it's not, somebody won't speak up or we won't start the meeting, but we have to realize the customer value of that, of everybody sitting in that room. And by waiting, we're adding waste, not delivering value.
So we get into unnecessary motion. Now, this is the people movement of the 8 ways. So if you're thinking about this as far as how far do we have to walk to go to where our breaks are, or to use the restroom, right? What is the walk from our work area? But it also could be a lot smaller too, as far as having a carpenter having to change the bit in his drill to a different size, right? Is it pretty consistently that he needs 2 different bits of the same size? What about getting 2 drills, right? You eliminate that motion of having to change a bit in and out.
You know, Ryan, something to add to that too on motion, you know, we will often, I think we're losing the days of having your project manager or having your design team in an opposite trailer or opposite site and having to have them come to site for meetings and stuff. Like, we're getting a lot more into co-location and seeing that. But by doing that, we're minimizing the motion, right? That person having to come to the site, that person having to walk across a trailer, walk across an office. That's another great example of motion that we often don't think about because it's just part of the job, right? That takes us to unnecessary transportation. So motion is the person. Motion is the motion of the body. While transportation has to do with equipment, materials, information, data. So we unnecessarily move that stuff around and it is waste. Think of moving material all over a job site because you staged something too early on a job site. But also think about your data. If you have a file that you are saving 7 files deep in a file structure that you have to go move around consistently, or maybe you have it saved in 4 different places, that is wasted transportation of moving that information around unnecessarily. You know, one of the tie-ins that we see on this too is when you start moving stuff around, especially data and material, it becomes defective.
All right, so defects. That's errors resulting in rework. It can happen everywhere. Defects really does tie into a lot of the other wastes, but it can be that we had inventory stored on site and it got damaged, right? Bringing cabinets in too early and now they're getting all scratched up sitting in the room because we may still be in rough-in or we might be hanging drywall. So but it also can be that we got too much on site or we overproduced. Now we have inventory sitting on site and there's defects hidden because it wasn't made properly. Now we're storing a bunch of material that's ultimately wrong and we don't even know it until we go to start installing.
So over processing or extra processing is one of my favorite because I think there's a lot of opportunity in our industry in general for this. One of the things that always comes to mind, so over processing is doing more work, extra steps, giving a higher quality that is needed by the customer or requested by the customer. And one of the things that always comes to mind for me is when we're working on a design build project and we're working with our design teams and we're walking through and we're defining what exactly do we need at a CD level of drawings. And we often find out that a lot of what the designers have planned on delivering is not needed yet. We don't need that information. Whereas if we hadn't have had that conversation, right, then that work would have been pushed and it wouldn't have been needed yet. So they would have been taking extra steps. They would have been doing extra work that wasn't needed at that time.
And the 8th waste is probably one of my more favorite ones to talk about or bring up is the unused creativity of team members. We just got out of intern season. All the interns are back at school, but I always think of them when they're here because they're brilliant minds, right? Everybody has their own unique experiences, and when we bring new people into, and even let's just say we have a new hire, right? If we're not taking their experience into account, it's why do we bring them on? It's also if they do speak up and we shut them down, maybe it wasn't the right idea, right? But we shut them down in a disrespectful way, they're going to be less likely to bring up their next good idea that may have been the right idea. So again, respectfully taking in everyone's ideas and everyone's thoughts into the process is important, even though, and if you don't use someone else's idea, be respectful about it. Say, hey, you know what, it's a great idea, please keep bringing them up. It's not the one we're going to go through, and here's why.
Ryan, I have another great story. So we have a general superintendent who just recently retired. He was a 30+ year employee for JDUN. And he tells a story, and he says that early on in his career, he was on a challenging project where they were trying to figure out concrete pours in a very tight space and how to just divide them up so that they can effectively just go around the foundation. And during this time, he said it was amazing because we had 4 top guys like in this room trying to figure this out, throwing ideas back and forth, and we couldn't come up with a plan that we weren't all just, that won't work, we can't do that, this is why. And he's like, an apprentice was walking by and I just pulled them in and just was jokingly like, hey, what do you think? Throw an idea out there. Because they were at the point that exhausted everything. And the apprentice threw an idea out there after looking at it, and that they ended up implementing and ended up gaining them schedule savings. And that apprentice to this day, now that he's a journeyman, tells that same story about how empowered he felt just getting pulled in and asked his opinion on what he thought, and then they went through with it, right? And that general superintendent, who's now retired, but he still told that story too, just the power of asking, right? People, they might not be the people who have all the experience, but they have a different perception. They have a different understanding of what you're looking at.
Great story. Thanks, Tammy. So we're going to move into a quote, and this is hands down, I think, one of my favorite quotes in all the trainings that I deliver, and it's from Dwight Eisenhower. And I'm going to actually physically read the full quote because it's to me it's so powerful. Farming is easy when the plow is your pencil and you're 1,000 miles from the field. Take a moment and soak that in, right? Do you really understand the process if you don't see it, if you can't touch it, your hands aren't on it, you haven't actually done it? Do you fully have the understanding of the process? And no. That's why Gemba is so important. That's why these walks are so important. Go out and see what is happening. Go and understand, right? You don't really understand it until you see it. And I know Tammy has a great example of this from our previous employer.
It's a story time with Tammy day. So a large company that I worked for long before I worked with Dunn, we had in the branch that I worked in, we had field guys, and the branch operations manager would enter the field guys' time every week. Well, there was always a problem with payroll. There was always something missed. And so at a very high level, above our branch level, they came down and installed a computer out in the warehouse and said, we want the workers to put their time in every week, every day. They're in charge of putting their time in every day. So you had 12 workers and you had 1 computer. And so it became a bottleneck. And there became a lot of bigger quality issues because you had 12 workers who weren't used to using this computer program. They weren't used to having to do that every day. They weren't used to, number one, some of just the ins and outs of tracking their sick time versus on-site time and defining it to the right project. And so it became an even bigger problem. But that was a great example of what happens when somebody at the highest level says, we're going to just change this process without understanding what the workers are doing, without understanding what they're able to do, and maybe looking for a solution down at that level.
All right, so what is the ultimate goal? Why do Gemba walks, right? I mean, we already walk site. All right. We're the little hidden, and it's not openly, but one of the goals is you want to create a culture on your project where workers they feel safe to speak up without fear of repercussion. That is why, right? You want, when a problem happens on site, you want the workers to raise their hand and not just suffer through it or figure it out. You want to be able to be there to help them, right? We want to continually do better. And that is why. If they're afraid of speaking up, you're going to keep doing things the same old way, and everyone's going to struggle, and it really can hurt morale even on your site. All right, 3 P's of a Gemba walk. So I know Tammy will have some good stories to come out of this, but if you think about this in the context of these 3 P's of what you're really looking at, right? What is the purpose? Why am I going out? Why are we actually looking at this? Do people understand their work? Do I understand their work, right? Get into that process. Are the handoffs reliable and efficient, right? If we're working from silo to silo, what do those bridges look like? And then the people, right? Respect and challenge people, raise accountability, right? We don't just employ you for your body to pound nails all day and to tighten bolts, right? We want you to use your mind. You're the one doing the work. Challenge the people to do the work. Now we are going to.
Hold on, Ryan, I have another story.
Okay, I knew it.
Surprise. So this actually happened really recently, so that was probably why it resonated on this one. So recently in our we call our Denver office the Rocky Mountain Division. Our leadership does walks. They try to do walks on all our job sites at least once a month, if not more. And we've been working with our leadership on learning how to do Gemba walks. So not just let's go out and look at safety and where we are at the project, but let's really go out and hone in. And one of the things that we're focusing on is waste, because oftentimes if you have waste, right, those are safety, quality, production impacts also that we want to be aware of. And so the other day I was out with a walk with our Rocky Mountain president, and we were watching these workers. They had a cut station set up, and they were taking the cut board and traveling across around an open hole under a piece of red tape, which I probably shouldn't be saying because we know that's a safety hazard right there, to get to where they needed to deliver it. And immediately it was like, hold on guys, what's going on? But I got our leadership group, it was our president and our operations manager, to just stop for a moment and let's just look at what happens. Before you jump in and want to solve the problem, let's take a moment and let's observe what's happening. And we spent about 5 minutes just watching, and then we kind of went off on our own and said, okay, so give them a little bit of coaching on how are we going to approach this. And the way they approached it was absolutely magical. It gives me jazz hands in the happiness world here. So, but right, they approached the worker to be like, hey guys, I was just watching what you're doing and what you got going on here, and tell me a little bit about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you know where you're taking it, and what's this helping you, enabling you to do further on in the job. And it became a conversation. It became a conversation with a set of 3 workers that could have easily turned into a confrontational, oh great, the president's out here telling me to do this, what are we going to do, and just completely deplete that amount of trust. But they created a safe and sharing environment just by approaching them and saying, tell me more, tell me what you're doing, why are you doing it that way? And instead of acting like we know everything, they approached it like, oh, well, why are you doing it that way? Help me understand. And so asking those in questions, the last question they asked the worker is like, if you could do this over and do it differently and stage it differently, I know you're in the middle of the work right now, but what would you do differently? They then took that and they empowered those workers to make a change. And they also empowered to say, is there something that I can help you with? Is there something that I can get you? Do we need to just stop? Can we help you move this around? That sounds like a great idea. How can we put this into play? And by giving them that opportunity to then make the change, I've been on that job site several times since that conversation, and that one worker right there, I will tell you, his voice is heard a lot more on that job site. In daily huddles, bringing up like, hey, I saw something as far as safety. Do you think there's a way we could improve this? Looking at his work and his daily plan and making sure that he's approaching it in a different way. And even wanting to learn more. Now that he knows that this was, you know, part of this process that we're going through in this training, he's interested and wants to learn more. So just by creating that foundation, using those humble inquiry questions, creating that safe environment, and respecting the workers and the work that they're doing, you're empowering them. You're creating a change that we all want to see in this industry.
So now we are going to watch a video of a Gemba walk. So this is our virtual Gemba walk today. So as this is courtesy of KHS and S contractors, we're very grateful that they're willing, they shared this with LCI. So as you watch the video up on the screen, you'll see the different ways pointed out. Now, as you're watching, I want you to think about when you debrief the team, what questions would you ask? How would you ask these questions, right? It's how would you help coach and guide those doing the work to get to see what you see as well? A bad spot in the wood. Having to flip the board around, over processing. I think the one that gets me the most in here, Tammy, is the motion of the up and down on the ladder. Because not only climbing up and down on the ladder, it's motion, but it's also every time you step off of that ladder, there's a chance that ladder could kick out, right?
Yeah.
So if you can get onto an elevated platform and stay there, you know, that's just the one that always gets to me in this one.
Well, there, you know, like we said earlier in the story, right? Motion waste often lead to quality, safety. You know, you can tie them right back into that, so that even going up and down the ladder, like all the safety implications plus productivity, you know, that kind of stuff that go along with it. I always look at their cut stations. That always enthralls me. I always think there's a better way, right? There's a better way to do that. You have multiple workers moving back and forth across the site. So even if you had one cut station and one cutter and a worker moving back, but maybe that's something they thought of, and maybe there's a reason why they didn't set it up that way. There's so much we can learn.
Right, and it all comes by asking questions and understanding the process, right? It's really easy for the two of us or everyone else watching the video to say, wow, they could have done this instead. Well, we don't know that. We don't know without asking. There's a lot of things I think they would agree that they could do differently. Between the motion of the gentleman upstairs and the unused creativity, why does he have to cut things as opposed to the other gentleman, right, who was cut for it?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if we were watching this for real out in the field, if we were here watching this, taking a list of questions, talking about what we could do differently, like some of the questions that I would be asking after this, Ryan, and I don't know about you, but hey, why do you have it staged this way? Where did this start? You know, it could have been that it was set up this way 3 days for something, another, you know, piece of work they were doing, and so they decided just to use it because it was already set up. But why did you stage that way? What was your plan for the day? How is this helping you succeed to your plan for the day? I don't know, is there anything else you would ask, Ryan?
Well, it's just making sure when you are asking questions, you're asking with genuine curiosity and interest. I had a superintendent. He came in the trailer one day and he knew that myself and my partner were getting run pretty ragged. And he came in and he just asked, well, guys, how's it going? And my partner said, good. And I said, great. And he said, that's what I like about you two. One of you uses the line and the other one swears by it, right? Don't be like that superintendent, please. Because he really didn't care, other than he just wanted to kind of get a good laugh out of the two of us. But if you're gonna stand here and observe the whole process to play out, I wouldn't, just like Tammy was saying, just don't initially just stop the process. Let the whole thing play out as well, right? So when you're observing, it's really hard to bite your tongue sometimes. It really can be for myself. Continue to watch the process. How could this be done differently? Tell me why, as Tammy said, why is it set up this way? And then dig into it that way. Don't just ask, how's it going? Don't be that old superintendent. Really ask with actual curiosity.
Yeah, Ryan, you brought up a great point. There's some article I read recently that talks about, we say to ask why, but oftentimes the right question to ask is what, because why can be a very defensive question, right? And especially when you're asking a worker, and whether it's in the field, whether it's in a design studio, wherever that is, when you ask the question of, hey, what are you doing? What made you choose to do it this way? What are your plans for the day? What are you define as success? Right? It's a little bit easier question to answer than why. Well, why are you doing it that way? It can be confrontational. So just being aware of some of that stuff. I know for me, doing this a lot, right, Ryan? We tend to get into this a little bit more, especially on the debrief part. Watching that body language too. Watching, is that person looking away? Are they engaged in the conversation? Asking them things like, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Or even setting it up before. Hey, I just want to watch because I'm learning what you guys are doing. I just want to watch. Do you guys have, and after you guys are done, do you have 10 minutes just to talk and I can ask you some questions, right? Setting it up so if you just show up on a job site and are standing there, or you show up somewhere and you're just standing there staring, people understand a little bit more of the why too.
Yeah. So after the walk, right? So just got done. If you're able to video a crew actually doing the work, I'm gonna absolutely hands down always recommend. Because then you can talk about the observations as you replay the video for the workers, because after the walk, the retrospective isn't just you that observed or the few people that observed. It's everybody, everyone that was involved. If you videoed someone, they need to be in there. Whoever you observed, they need to be in there to talk about what was observed. Again, we're getting those who do the work involved in helping improve the work. That's the goal of this, right? Passion, people are very passionate about what they do. I'm a carpenter actually by trade. I'm a very passionate carpenter. I'm a professional. It can get a little tough to talk about how I can improve my work, especially for someone who I would see that doesn't understand my work, right? I'm just gonna flat out say it.
What, Ryan? My way is the perfect way. What are you talking about?
So just remember, as you're having these conversations with our trade workers and with the trade foremen, just remember and remind them, we're focusing on the process. This isn't anything to do with you. We want to help you improve. What do you see? Again, it's going to always go back to, if you start focusing on a person, all of a sudden that blame, the craft worker is going to put their guards up, and you're not going to get anywhere. We're not going to build that culture of trust. We're not going to build that culture of improvement. That's why it's so important to build that trust with them right away. I'm just here to observe. I want to better understand what's going on. See where you think we can improve. It's hands down. This is where execution of a Gemba walk can get botched really quickly. Tammy, I think you would agree with that notion of this. It's pretty easy to watch people to do the work. It's the after walk retrospective that this can get botched pretty easily.
You know, I have to tell you too, I've seen this botched pretty easily. A job I was at in Portland, Oregon, it was an existing job site, and we were doing improvement work to it and some TI work to it. Sorry, improvements in my vocabulary all the time. So we had a problem with one of the fans. We got in a room with the designer. We were talking through all these problems, and we kept saying, let's just go look. Let's just go out there. And the design team, they originally didn't want to, but then we went out there with them. We finally got them out to go do a walk, and we spent a good hour or so just looking at like the function of the fan, how all the systems were running into it, what it was doing, so then we could really dive down deep into the problem. We had a crusty old superintendent, and I say that with love because he actually is one of my favorite superintendents. But his comment was, well, do you guys need me to explain to you what the build side of this, or do you actually understand it? Because I know you're just designers. And it was just instant shutdown, right? Just instant shutdown. And again, we were there to learn, to understand, so we could dive deep into this problem solving. And so there's just little things like that are things that can turn that after the walk debrief, just turn it into, there's no value that comes from it.
So if you think of the Gemba walk as being the check in the PDCA cycle, right? We're going to check to see how it works. The retrospective of it is the A part. That's where we're going to make action. We're going to create improvements out of this. We're going to do something better, right? We may not do everything better. It's small improvements will advance the boulder up the hill, as they say. So this is definitely where the A part of PDCA comes into play. And a little bit more on the retrospective part, right? As I touched on the last slide. Retrospectives, you can do it on anything, and they can be as simple as what you see on the screen right now. If you're doing something that's not working, stop, right? What are we going to stop doing? If something is working, let's keep doing it. And then what are we going to start doing, right? If you have a stop, there should be a start associated with that stop, just as a general rule. But this is hands down my favorite way of doing retrospectives. There's a few other ways you can Google them yourself. This is the simplest way to do a retrospective and to create actions out of it. What are we going to do differently as a result of what we've seen today?
One of the things too, just some things to watch out for, especially if you're doing this in a larger group of people, is the blame game, right? We want to focus on the process and not the people, so steer away from the blame game. If there is a breakdown in communication, what was the process, right? How did we get to that point? It's not about the person, it's about the process. So just some things to be aware of on that. Also, Ryan and I were just talking about this earlier, that oftentimes we like to pair up the stop and start because they go hand in hand. If you have something that you want to stop doing, then absolutely, what do you want to do differently? What do you want to start doing in its place, right? So that could be a great way to change up that start doing, so you're taking action to adjust. And I always like to start with keep doing, because we start on a positive note. What's working well? So then by the time we get to the stop doing, right, it's different tone in the room.
Yeah, if you do start with stop, I'll just caution you to make sure that mentalities and attitudes in the room stay level at least, because you could get the feeling of, well, did I do anything right? So yes, I absolutely agree with Tammy on that. If you start with keep, at least, hey, this is going really well, and this is something we observed really well, or what did you observe? Don't just start with the negatives. Sometimes people can be a little hurt by that.
And like Ryan said earlier, this is a really easy thing you can do. This does not take, again, it doesn't take hours we have Arlene's specialist in Portland. She has a very large self-perform team that is working on a parking garage currently. And every single day they do a retrospective of, hey, what worked really well today? What are we going to keep doing? What didn't work so well? What are we going to stop doing? What are we going to do differently tomorrow? And that way, the whole crew is involved in that. It's not just the foreman, it's not just one senior journeyman, it's the whole crew that just takes 5 minutes at the end of the day. They have sticky notes up on a board that's on one of the floors, and then that way when they start fresh the next morning with their daily huddle, they have it right there in front of them. And it's been very impactful for them. All right. So we've taken you on a journey. We're coming down close to the end. There's still some more we have to cover, but we're coming to the close of our journey at least. So we talked about the place of the process. So you need to understand where the value is. You need to understand what you're going to look for. You need to go to the place where the work is being done. And I don't want to confuse it because I know Ryan and I come from the build world. So I don't want to confuse it of the construction site. The place where the process is happening could be very many different places, right? It could be where the design is happening. It could be in the model. It could be in the office somewhere. It could be at the grocery store for, like I said, you could be looking for something in your normal everyday life. But then you want to observe, draw that circle, that imaginary circle. I don't tend to draw a circle with chalk. I don't carry chalk with me, but draw the imaginary circle and stand in it and observe. Give yourself a good view of the process of the work that's happening, right? Give you the opportunity to observe, take notes, write down what you're seeing, write notes in your questions. And then you have the ability to go and talk with people to understand, asking those humble inquiry questions, understanding more, learning. Right, we often go into something, whether it's a meeting, whether it's going to look at something with a set mindset of this is what's going to happen, this is what the outcome is going to be. You want to challenge that. This is your opportunity to challenge that, to say, how is this different than what I see or what I believe is going to happen? Right? If we go in there with that set mindset, you're not going to be open for that learning experience. Great way to start. Look for those 8 ways. 8 ways, they catalyst off of each other, right? You see one, you're going to start seeing more. And it's not about perfection. It's not about, oh, that is exactly motion waste. It fits right in. It's about, you know what, I'm seeing that. I think that's motion waste. Let me talk to this worker, this person more to understand better what that is, right? What are they doing? Why are they walking across the office? So it's not about being perfect and being able to perfectly define that. It's about seeing that opportunity for a possible improvement. Then mapping and document those observations. Like Ryan said earlier, that checkpoint, right? We made a plan, they're doing it, let's check on it, what's happening? The ideal state is this, the current state is this, there's a gap. Why? Why do we have that gap? So then being able to adjust that plan to close that gap between current and ideal. Ryan, you look like you wanted to add something to that.
I think you know my face well enough now. Well, it's when you map and document observations, actually have somewhat real data, right? Don't have subjective data. Make sure it really is truly objective. That this is 30 steps from here to there. If we could shorten it to 15 steps, what would that do, right? Again, that's also focusing on the process, not on the person saying, oh, you know, Bill or Sally, you know, it takes you 30 steps back and forth. Why are you taking so many steps? No, that's not the question to ask. The question to ask is, why aren't so many steps needed to do this? So when you're mapping it out, actually have real objective. So it can't be well, you kind of say it this way versus that way. No, this is what we observe. This is what we see. And that's why I love the videoing as well, because you watch with them. You can both see exactly what's going on in real time. It's not what my eyes saw, it's what our eyes saw.
Yeah, and I'm probably dragging this out, so I apologize. But right, the other part of the video, I find the video very effective too, because you can instantly stop it and have everybody in the room and say, hey, this is what I just saw. Or somebody else in the room could stop it and say, hey, look at this right here. Like, it's that instant replay, right? And you can watch it over and over. Why did we do that? Like, I didn't realize we did that. So there's a lot of questions you can ask along the way by being able to review it, like stop, start, stop, start. All right, I will tell you, the Jim Womack book, Gemba Walks, is a really great resource out there. You can actually, if any of you have Amazon Prime and have Kindle Unlimited, it is actually free. The e-book edition is free on Kindle Unlimited right now, so you can get it through there. But I do strongly recommend that book as a resource. Some things just to recap what we've learned. Go to where the value is created, right? Gemba is about where the value created, which means that you have to understand what that value is and where it's being created. So it doesn't mean that you just show up somewhere one day and be like, huh, cool, I'm gonna do a Gemba walk, I got time, right? It's understanding that is the first key to going to Gemba. Making sure that it is purposeful. Again, like Ryan said, we do walks, we walk places, we go see stuff all the time, but we need to have a purpose and we need to have an intent. First and foremost, that is learning. And what are you learning about? Are you learning more about the process? Are you learning more about the current state? But most importantly, what are you learning about the people that are there? Having a list of engaging questions. I keep referring to Humble Inquiry. That is an actual book, a very short book, Humble Inquiry, if you guys interested. It is a great read and talks a lot about engaging questions and how to use questions to build relationships and to better understand. But have a list with you. Pick 2 or 3 open-ended questions that you know will engage people. Keep them in the front of a notebook. Keep it on a note card. Keep them on a sticky note. Goodness knows I love sticky notes. Keep them there with you, right? So you always have them and you're not always having to remember them. But let me start with these 3 questions, because usually what happens is they catalyst off of each other. Then understanding, right, what the customer is willing to pay for. Now, in the terms of, if we're looking at, in the terms of customers we talked about earlier, as far as if a project coordinator is the customer of a project manager, they're not paying the project manager for something, but they are giving their time and effort, right? The project manager is giving time and effort to deliver value to that customer. So understanding what that value is and who that customer is really key and important, and understanding for that Gemba walk. The value stream that we live in is designers and constructors. We're not separate. We're all in part of that value stream. There's a handoff. So breaking down those silos, understanding that whole value stream from the very beginning of conceptual to the very end of handing the keys over to the owner, right? Understanding that they all serve that value stream. So that way we're optimizing the whole and not just focusing on the silos. Which kind of leads me into my next one, which is those interdependent activities, right? What are those handoffs? There's a lot of handoffs sometimes that we just don't realize because it's everyday life. It's the work that we do, and we don't realize that there is a handoff or an interdependent activity. Walking in the Gemba brings people together. The story that I used earlier about our Rocky Mountain leadership, right? If they hadn't been on that Gemba walk, if they hadn't been wanting to learn more, would our president have ever talked to that journeyman and asked him questions? Maybe, maybe not, I'm not sure. But now they have a relationship where if they see that on the job, say, hey, how's it going? What'd you learn, right? It's a conversation. It brings people together. It builds that foundation of trust. You know, at the end of the day, it is not our tools and processes that build, design, or deliver the value to our customers. It's the people within it. And so it's that true respect for people. This is one of my favorite because can't even tell you how many times I've seen on job sites, right? The project managers managing from the desk. Right? We don't want that. Or even, you know, you have people who don't ever leave the office and get out to see. I mean, at the end of the day, our industry, we deliver a building. We build. That is the heart of our industry. And we need to have our designers get out there and understand the site and understand, and have these alongside of us understanding. We need to be out there. We need to have our managers, our learning and development people, everybody understanding the heart of our business. All right, so Gemba walks, remember, connect, process, and people improvements. Help to deeply understand the current condition at the workplace and people. We want to bridge the gaps And my favorite is the check part of the PDCA cycle. So we have a plan, we've gone and do it. Now it's our opportunity to check to see how that plan works and adjust.
And I think in construction, the check part is the least used part of PDCA. We're really good at planning and really good at trying to do, and we're really good at changing how we do sometimes. It's really the deep check and the deep understanding of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I find it very interesting. I think life is normal too, right? We're really good at making a plan, and we all know plan A works out wonderfully every time, right? There's never any problems. I think it's the reason why they call it a first run study, right? Let's do it the first time and see what happens. And then let's check back and adjust. But you're absolutely right. And sometimes we overthink it. It just needs to be a short little, right? 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute.
Make it any bigger than it has to be. There's waste embedded in that too. So
exactly, absolutely. All right, so more learning opportunities, you guys. I know you're chomping at the bit to learn more, since Ryan and I probably just scraped the surface with you guys today. If you do go to the leanconstruction.org website and hover over the learning title there is a Gemba section, and on that Gemba section there is a one-pager for you. There's also a video from the 2011 Lean, I'm gonna mess this up, Eileen, even though I wrote it down, Lean Transformation Summit. I think I got it, the Gemba Walk. So there's other opportunities to learn more about Gemba. If you wanna learn more in general, here's books that the LCI has published. Now, I will tell you, I'm a huge advocate of these books because they weren't somebody in a room writing it. All three of these books were written because large groups of industry professionals, people who are doing this every single day, they're not all of them, their main roles are lean. Some of them are project managers, some of them are superintendents, some of them are design managers, right? Are coming together to write these books, to put out there to help the industry learn more. So I'm a huge advocate of these books. I refer to them a lot too. There's also your local community of practice if you want to learn more about that. If you don't know where that is, if you're not aware, again, leanconstruction.org website has the opportunity for you to dive a little deeper into that community of practice, understand what the events are coming up, and then who you need to reach out to. Week of October 19th is, I like to call it the Super Bowl of the lean world, the lean construction world, the Congress, right? So it is our week-long conference where everybody comes together to share and learn from each other. This year it will be virtual. Monday and Tuesday will be the learning track days, and then the rest will be a lot of just, teams like Ryan and I work with coming to share their lessons learned. This is what we're doing. This is what we've learned. This is what we tried. This is, what didn't work. And so we're still trying to figure out, and these are our next steps. And so
Tammy, this is when I get to tell a story.
Okay, go ahead.
So as a matter of fact, I'm going to pop my camera on so I can tell this story. So actually Congress, the learning track is Monday. And that's the deep dive education training days where you get the intro to lean, you get the last planner system, target value delivery. You really get those heavy duty trainings. Tuesday through Friday, shortened days a little bit. That's where Tammy was talking about, you get the opportunity to learn from your peers, have lessons learned, figure out how they've solved some problems you might be dealing with. The exhibit hall is open. There's a lot of networking opportunities for you, some great stuff. But on Friday, we'll also be doing some virtual Gemba walks. So I wanted to share that opportunity with you as well. We'll be doing some Gemba training throughout the week. And you have access to that on that Gemba site that Tammy was talking about earlier. You hover over learning in the blue bar on the leanconstruction.org website. Click on Gemba. You got the Lean Construction Summit right. That was fantastic. But you'll also see Gemba at Congress, and you'll get that Gemba training as well. So I just wanted to pop that in there for you, Tammy. And I'll go ahead and stick around while you're going over the LCI resources.
Thank you, Eileen. I really appreciate that.
Not a problem at all.
Other resources are the e-learning courses that are out there. I will tell you that I've been through a couple of them. They are wonderful. They're a great resource to use, especially in this virtual world and our busy world that we have around us, just having the time to go through those. So I am a strong advocate of those also. Eileen, how do are these on the website too? I just want to make sure I don't misrepresent.
They're absolutely on the website. These are under the learning tab as well. So if you go to learning, you'll see LCI e-learning right under there. Click on the e-learning, you'll be able to see the courses we have available. There's also a preview link right next to each course. So you can preview that first module of the courses, see how the information is presented, see how interactive they are, take a look at some of the downloadable resources we have available in them, and just take a look for yourself and see how those are going. Those are going. There's also some enterprise level discounts for corporate members. So if you have any questions about that, contact e-learning discounts at leanconstruction.org.
Okay. And so knowing that we were going to have a large group of people and we wanted to save a lot of time to be able to field your questions, so we ended up half an hour early, so we have that half an hour. So questions, but we also want to hear from you guys. What will you do with this information? What will you do differently today? What will you do differently tomorrow? And what will you do differently next week? So Eileen, you want to kick off the questions?
I do. And for the questions that they answered, go ahead and put the answers to those questions in the questions box, because we really do want to know. We'd like for other people to know. We want to go ahead and read those out. So the answers to those questions that they asked, what are you going to do differently today, tomorrow, next week, next month? Go ahead and put those in there. It turns out some people say they don't have audio at all. But then that seems to be only one person. We have a lot of people that are still writing in. So if it turns out you can't hear me, I don't know how to say this, sign off and sign back in. I'm going to write that into the questions box. We had some person write that they're going to immediately improve. They're going to take it back, they're going to improve, and then that's what they're going to do immediately. So let's start with questions. We also want those plus deltas. Again, pluses are things you liked about the presentation, you thought were great. Deltas are those wishes. We understand that the audio throughout the presentation was a delta. We were recording it, so the audio was fine on the back end. So you should be able to get all that audio correct when that recording comes out. So the first question is, how is the implementation of just-in-time affected in a COVID-19 environment where supply chains can be less reliable? I'm just going to throw that one out there for you guys.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, it's one of the challenging things that we obviously have to face, right? And in this world, what it makes us do as project leaders is it makes us have to have our plan Bs, right? Always think of what's the worst that could happen, but then it also makes us take it upstream as well, as far as, okay, I need my air handling units in Minnesota in July so we can get them all connected, so this winter we can run the air handling units in the building and I don't have to use temporary heat. Well, now we're affected by the transport for COVID, or there's delays because of that. As going forward, we're going to have to really better understand those delays and what could happen if things don't work out, right? And in my example, if we're not going to get the air handling units, okay, what is our temp heat for in Minnesota, right? What is our temp heat plan? What is the repercussions that happen because we didn't get this? And then being open about it, right? Again, we're all an interconnected team, and everyone needs to be aware of, here's our worst case scenario, here is our best case scenario, and anything that can happen in between. So it's, yes, we're still seeing the challenges, and I've seen it with steel on projects recently, and it's always going to be hard to get tile across the sea from Italy. I swear that's every job, but it's really on us as builders to really better understand that and then take it as soon as upstream. You know, when I do pull plans, when I do a milestone plan for a project, I look at when submittals need to be in then we add a little extra time on there just in case we need to resubmit, right? If we get the submittals early, great. Tammy, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Well, I was looking at as more as the problem solving, right? And going to Gemba, like you said, we know it's there, and if we're already planning for it, if we're already putting it into our pull plans, if we have it on our constraint boards and we're communicating, but being able to go out into that area, being able to go to the job site, being able to look at the aspect of, okay, so if we're putting the air handler into place, what is the work that gets done for that? Right? If we don't get the air handler, what is the work that isn't going to get done? How does that affect the job site? So that you can properly plan not only for that delay, but without stopping the job site. You might have to, unfortunately, what can we do without resequencing work so where it's burdensome? So having to look at all those other objectives, those are opportunities to go to Gemba and see what's happening.
Ryan, I never would have guessed Minnesota, so thank you for pointing that out to us. Absolutely. So I want to remind people, go ahead and put those plus deltas in. We really want to get that continuous improvement feedback from you guys so we can make our webinars more of what you wanted to hear. Our next question is, and this is great since you both are lean specialists, how do you create buy-in to the Gemba and lean culture? Because you had mentioned it was a culture, and I know somebody picked up on that. So how do you create that buy-in? And I guess I'm going to add to it because I hear this from a lot. Does it start from the bottom up or the top down?
Well, there's a lot of Kool-Aid and brainwashing. I'm joking. So,
Are you?
So I honestly, I don't really have a good answer to the top up or the bottom down. I've seen it done both ways. I think it starts with understanding the value to the customer. And if you're starting from the top up, right, what are the risks and challenges that your bottom workers are feeling? And being able to bring that value and helping through lean principles, through tools, through behaviors, helping them to overcome some of those challenges, that's where you create the buy-in. And some of that might be really easy. Some of that might be just like we talked about, a just-in-time delivery. Some of that might be better communication through an understanding of a work sequence through a pull plan, and then using weekly work plans and look-ahead plans. And then also doing the same thing at the top, from the top down, understanding at the top level, what are some of those risks and constraints that they are really worried about, and utilizing those to help them. When you start to show them the value, and it's not just a lot of theory, then they start to see that, and they start to grab on, and they want more, and they want to do more. What do you got, Ryan?
I was gonna say, it's a lot of ways to grab buy-in. Is the proof is in the pudding, right? Get initial successes and be able to prove them, and they can be small, right? They can be, and as far as top down or bottom up, I agree with Tammy. I've seen it done both ways. I've seen it done where the president of the company says, this is the direction that I'm taking the company in. You're either going to be a part of it, or I'll help you find a different place to work. As brutal as that sounds, it was the case, right? But it did help with the transformation as far as everyone knew what the boss expected, and he lived through it though. He lived through the lean culture. He actually looked at ways to improve for the workers, right? He wasn't looking at just improving his spot. He wanted the whole company, everything under his umbrella, and he wanted it starting with those that put the work in place, right? So it was kind of created a little bit of a sandwich effect, but very quickly you were able to see those who were on board and those who were not. And he did some very deliberate coaching with those in his leadership that were not on board. I mean, it's not an easy question to understand, or it's not an easy answer. But the cool thing is, and I know this from my own experience, you can transform your own bubble or your own circle of influence on your own today. There's nothing stopping you whatsoever. I'm a lean nerd. I was initially not bought into it, and now I have 5S in my garage and in my shop.
Really?
Tammy's seen pictures. So it has no effect on anyone else other than me. I'm the only one who works out there. But it's myself going through my own personal lean transformation that helps drive me forward. Again, it's your commitment to act is more important than focusing on someone else's commitment to it.
And I know we could go, this could be like our whole last 30-minute answer, trust me. So I guess too, just the pylon and then we'll be done, is small wins.
Yes.
Small wins are huge, they're powerful, right? Small wins because it doesn't take a lot to stabilize from that change or that small little improvement. So you can create more value and climb up towards the bigger returns.
It's the Paul Akers, another plug for Paul Akers, I guess. This is not intentional, but it is that 2-second lean mentality, right? What can I do right now that is going to save me 2 seconds tomorrow? So.
We got another answer to your question about what can you do now, what can you do next week, and I want to read this one out. We have a bi-weekly lean meeting in-house. One thing I can see us implementing will be taking this lean meeting to the field with a group Gemba walk at each of our job sites. Pre-planned by having a specific list of questions to answer once we reach the site, and then taking the time to review as a group to see what positive changes can be made. Do you guys have comments on that one?
Yes, that's exactly it. You know, because I would challenge the thinking of, well, what are you doing inside of the conference room every 2 weeks, right? Get out and go see it. That's great.
And I would say don't limit yourself to the job site. I mean, we've done internal Gemba walks where here in this office where we've had a project coordinator show us a process she does and walk us through this is how we do it, right? And it's awkward because we're all watching her, so you're just kind of under the gun. But it's more to understand so we can improve the process. And we've had a group of people watching it and then asking questions. Well, why did you do this? And why do you have to do that step? And why do you need 2 signatures? And right, to better understand. So don't limit yourself to the field too. There's anywhere you can do it.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to let people know again that a copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent to all registrants. So you will receive a copy of this. Hopefully by end of the day today, if not sometime tomorrow. So we'll go ahead and have that all out to you. A question that we have that just came in is, I know that you gave us samples of the questions that you can ask and things like that, but is there any template that can be used during the Gemba walks? Is there something that is available or something that they should absolutely be thinking about? Should they be writing things down? I mean, how is any type of template that's available for them to use if they've never done a Gemba walk before?
So I don't personally have a template, but I like to have like a pictogram showing the 8 ways personally, just as a reminder of the 8 ways, because as I'm watching the process, and then I mean obviously a notebook, but as I'm watching the process, I can look at the ways and I'll even do a little spider diagram and tie them all together of which one's tied to here and there. That's my personal what I do. I don't really run off a whole lot of templates. Because I let the questions take me where they're gonna go.
I've seen templates. You can Google it. A ton of templates will come out. I'm not one to use. I'm a big fan. My notebook that I always have on me is like a dot grid. So I'll usually just kind of section my paper off to say observations, questions I have, notes about what I saw. So that way I kind of have it sectioned off like that so that I can go directly to my questions or my observations.
Fantastic. You had also mentioned PDCA. How do you suggest, or where do you suggest that we use PDCA? Weekly huddles, monthly meetings, daily meetings? How often do you suggest that type of thing?
Everywhere, all the time.
That's the easy answer for that. Back to, we're really good at making plans. We're really good at making plans. We're good at doing the work. As far as the C and the A part, because you got to let your experiments play out a little bit. So you could do it maybe once a week on your daily huddles, I'll say. And it really depends. That at the start, you may want to do it more so you can start making changes. At some point when it becomes, and we're doing a plus delta at the end, and the only one that gets brought up is it's either a plus someone brought cookies or a delta that no one brought cookies. At that point, I normally will stop and ask and go, okay, that's great that you guys like cookies. How can we really improve? So it's tough to exactly draw the line, but it is having that improvement mindset, the PDCA mindset into everything you do, not making those knee-jerk reactions to making changes, if that makes sense. Oh, this didn't go good, well, let's just go change a whole bunch of stuff and not really think about it. No, you need to make sure you're doing the C. You need to make sure you're stopping to actually look back at what happened.
And, an really easy way too is just within your own work, doing it daily. What's your plan for the day for your own self? What do I need to accomplish today? If your to-do list is 3 pages long, then what are my top priorities? What are the top 3 things that no matter what, if the world falls apart, I have to get these 3 things done, and the rest are just icing on the cake. And then spend the end of your day, spend 5 minutes, jot it down on your notebook, write it on somewhere in your computer. This is what worked really well for me today. What at work I had time to focus, or in this meeting this went really well, and this is what I think I want to do better, right? Or I want to do differently. So then when you start your next day, it's just a really quick, okay, this is what happened yesterday, this is what I want to do differently, how I'm going to apply that today. And so then you're getting into your own PDCA cycle every single day, right? So you're practicing it, because when you're practicing it for yourself, you're going to find it creeping into all your other processes also.
We're going to feed off of what Ryan said. I want to make sure you guys get those plus deltas in. How can we improve our webinar? And what did you like about our webinar? What did you think we did really well? Our next question is, can Gemba help create stronger respect for all team members of the project in this divided political time as part of the improvement process?
Absolutely. I do think that it can create respect. Oftentimes what happens, right, on a project, especially when we're not in the same room, especially when we're virtual, there's a barrier between us. There's a barrier of coming together as a group, coming together as people. And when we can go to Gemba and understand better maybe what that person is doing, or the processes that they're in, or what their challenges are, we're better able to connect with each other, and we're better able to understand. Our brain makes stories, right? We get lost in the stories that we do, because that's naturally what our brains do. And so by going to learn, we're giving our brain the ability to create a new story, instead of, oh man, they're just not doing their job, or they don't know what they're doing. Maybe there is a training problem. Maybe they didn't get trained, and we need to realize that and give them what that person needs, versus just kind of stepping back into our corner or silo. Ryan, did you have anything you want to add?
No, that's almost word for word what I was going to say, Tammy.
Oh, I nailed it.
Nailed it. Our next question is, how do other lean tools work with Gemba Walks, such as Last Planner System and things like that?
All right, I'll go for that one. I'll use Last Planner to start. So as superintendent, Last Planner, we have daily huddles. The trade partner foremen are reporting out, what they got done. Well, if you're a superintendent doing a Gemba walk, you should really have your weekly work plan in front of you, because the plan for the week is right in front of your face now, right? Is what we planned on doing actually happening? Excuse me. And then if it's not, start asking questions why, right? Why are we deviating from the plan? What's happening? How can I help you, right? As a superintendent, that's my support for you. Now, if you want to tie in 5S to your Gemba walks, that's where I get really nerdy, because if you have a project that's operating on 5S, everything has its place, we have the right amount of things on site, we're in a sustainment mode of 5S. When you do your Gemba walk like that, you know exactly what's out of place, what could be helped, what we could learn better or do to improve, right? That I'm a nerd for 5S on sites. I like clean, I like organized sites. I like sites where we're not always searching for things, right? Yeah, so if you have 5S going on your site, when you go on your Gemba walk, that's ultimately your 5S audit in essence. Tammy, want to add to that?
I was just going to say, well, it's not just the tools, it's the behaviors too, right? Because we have to have the behaviors that support the tools. So when you're on that Gemba walk, you're able to see the behaviors, you're able to see the morale, you're able to see what the people, how they're reacting, because oftentimes that's one of our biggest hurdles too, is changing some of those behaviors to a different way of thinking or a different way of doing something. And so there's so much. I was just thinking, choosing by advantages, CBA, right? If we have a decision to make, going to Gemba, going to where those alternatives are to see, right, what it is. So that way, when we are making that decision, defining our factors, talking about attributes, we're really informed. We really understand it. That's another example I have. I think I could go on and on, right?
That's what we like about the two of you. You're so passionate about Gemba, what it is and what you do. So thank you so much for that. The next question is there any relation between a site audit and a Gemba walk?
I will say it really depends. And the site audit, or the definition that I'm thinking of, is like a safety audit, right? We're gonna walk across sites. They're definitely related. You got to make sure, and if you're doing a safety audit, I mean, there should be PDCA wrapped into it just inherently. They're not going to use the same terms typically as we would, unless they're a great company, for lack of a better way of saying that. But they're related. They could be done even at the same time, I would argue. It's, again, looking at that purpose of what the walk is, right? What are we going to look at? You could do a safety audit that is a Gemba walk. We're just going to go look at the safety part of this process. There may be other improvements that come out, but we're looking at it for the safety part of it.
Yeah, and what I've usually experienced from a site audit is it's a series of checks and balances, and that's the opposite of what you want on a Gemba walk. So I think intentionally understanding, like Ryan said, is the purpose to go fill out this form and these checks and balances for the site audit. If that is, then that needs to be separate than the Gemba walk. Or is there a series of information and we want to go understand safety in this area? Maybe there's a lot of ladder use. Maybe there's a lot of hand tool use, and there's been an uptick of near misses or safety incidences. So again, just understanding that purpose and what is the objective and the outcome that needs to be had.
Fantastic. So we've looked at, and Ryan, you mentioned videoing a Gemba walk any chance that you can possibly get. How do you approach the conversation of videoing the workers? How does that happen?
So it definitely needs to be built on trust, right? You need to build a trusting relationship out from the start. Please don't just go out and start videoing your workers. For one, the second they see that camera, their natural instincts are out the window because they don't know why they're being watched. So I always do, if I'm going to set a camera up on site, it's typically initiated by the superintendent or the project team themselves, where I will talk to them about Gemba walks. Hey, let's go and walk. I'll mention in there that, it's really great if we're actually able to video. So then we can bring the craft workers inside and everyone can witness the work that was done, not just us watching. And I'll also sell that point of, if we have a camera set up, there isn't 5 people in shiny hard hats, brand new vests, standing on the top of the hill, watching a bunch of workers do their work, right? It's a lot less awkward. So getting that question, or really getting the buy-in from the superintendent and the PM, because again, I can't just walk on site and do a Gemba walk. It has to be someone really related to the process, or someone in an authority, right? Someone who's in charge of the process at the end of the day. So it's once I get the conversation started with them, then I'll talk about videoing, explain that it's easier. And then when we go down to actually talk to the crew before we're going to video them, say, hey, you guys are really great at your jobs. We want to understand how you improve. This isn't a way to catch you doing things. We just want to know how we can do this better. We want to better understand the process with you.
Tammy, do you have anything to add to that?
I was just gonna say a lot. I mean, I really just mimic what Ryan said, is that building the trust and alignment. I mean, I usually found it beneficial too to do a little bit of just training of Gemba Walk training, even though we're not necessarily doing a training, but just setting the stage.
Okay. Our next question is, you guys mentioned you do a lot of Gemba walks on your sites and things like that. And can you put up a contact slide really quickly? We had someone ask if there was a contact slide available. There we go. So if you have any questions for them specifically about Gemba walks, feel free to contact them directly. If you're also a part of their communities of practice, you can reach them through their communities of practice. Thank you very much for putting that up there as well. You mentioned that you do Gemba walks on a lot of your sites or almost all of your sites. What is one thing in particular that you've taken from one of your sites and been able to improve? Because you mentioned processes in the office and you've mentioned other processes, but let's talk about the sites now that you've done Gemba walks on and you've been able to say, hey, that's overproduction, or hey, that's wasted motion, or something like that you've been able to instantly improve.
I'll take this one because this is just really excited me. I'm working with our self-perform group, and we've actually built that into some of our checklists, like our pre-pour checklists and stuff, and our pre-planning checklists that we have. But some of the things that we've really been able to take away and improve within our self-perform is a lot of that motion and transportation waste, and just realizing that staging our job on a day-to-day basis is just as important as staging our job for the whole project of where we're laying out our materials or where we're storing our materials. So being able to look morning to morning of where are we working, where is the work, where's our paths, where do we need to have the materials, and where do we need to have the workers? So that way we're also cutting down on the wear and tear to their bodies, making sure we're not sending them across the site to carry something heavy. We're lessening the bending and lifting, just stuff like that. And it's really exciting to see that and to put it into play. So I'm glad that question came up.
Ryan, how about you? On your sites, what have you noticed and been able to put into place from a Gemba walk?
Yeah, it's very similar to Tammy's as well. And I'll just tell the story of carpenters using a miter box as a cut station. They're cutting blocking all day, and there's small pieces of scrap after the Gemba walk. As we're observing, all the scrap was going on the ground. There's sawdust going everywhere. And then at the end of the day, because it's expected to clean up after yourselves, right? They would be bending over, picking all the material up and putting in. This was about maybe 15 minutes at the end of the day, could almost have been spent cleaning up. It was a pretty big cut station. Well, just out of the Gemba walk, one of the carpenters and the laborer that worked with them, that was always helping, they realized that, well, if we had a trash cart right directly behind all of the saws, and we had 4 saws set up in the station, if we had a trash cart behind each and one of them, all they would have to do is just basically pick the piece up and just set it. They wouldn't have to even move. They wouldn't have to walk. All they'd have to do is just grab the piece and throw it in the bin. And the laborers would come by. They would see that they're getting almost full. They would take the trash cart out with them, and they would bring an empty one in its place. And it was just it was one of the coolest improvements that I've ever seen. And it was brought up by those doing the work because they allowed us to video them, and they saw it. It wasn't us bringing it up. We didn't even have to coach them. They saw it themselves. And they went, oh, yeah, you're stopping, 15 minutes early when you don't need to. So that was a pretty cool one.
That's fantastic. So I will say that we are out of time. Thank you so much, everyone, for putting in those plus deltas and those questions. Elsie, I would like to thank Tammy and Ryan for presenting today, and J.E. Dunn for allowing you to do that, since we know you guys are so busy with everything. So thank you for taking the time. We'd also like to thank all of you for attending, and our friends around the world from LCI Cutter for coming as well. And we hope to see you on our next webinar, which is September 9th. So you guys have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Keep safe, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.